We're having some people start to funnel in, so we should get started. And so my name is Rob Krieger, and I will be moderating this session. This session is about SIMIODE and SCUDEM benefits, where to start. And we have three panelists, and I will let them introduce themselves and give some opening remarks about what they have used with SIMIODE and the competitions in SCUDEM. And hopefully that will begin the dialogue. We ask each of you to either type a question into the chat, or if you're comfortable, happy to have you come on and ask questions. We want this to be an interactive session. And so let's start with the Pattersons, please.
Oh, hi, I'm Sarah Patterson. I am an assistant professor at Virginia Military Institute. This is my second year here. And so our department is an applied math department. The school is a military school, so about half of our students commission and the other half kind of go on to do jobs in industry. And we have a couple students go to grad school, but for the most part, it's commissioning in the military and then going into industry. So I've taught differential equations twice, both in the fall and in both of the classes. I used a lot of the SIMIODE resources. So some of the people in my department have written some of them. In particular, Jessica Libertini and Karen Bliss wrote some of them, and then they picked some others off of the website. So I've used those to kind of help prepare students to eventually do the SCUDEM competition. And so I'm happy to talk more about that, or the modeling scenarios that I've used in class, or the SCUDEM competition. The one in 2019 was in person, and then there was the 2021, which was online. So I could talk about the differences in those, because I don't think the format's been kind of picked yet, but and how I use that in my class. So.
Yeah, and I'll sort of go off a little bit of that. So I'm also at VMI with Sarah, did my PhD at NC State. I'm actually not an applied mathematician by trade, but as Sarah said, we are an applied math department. I'm actually a math ed person, and so I convinced the department somehow that it's worth having a math ed guy around. So I'm there, and I'm really going to have more of the perspective from the pedagogical perspective, and kind of, I have a lot of experience developing tasks and helping. And so I've observed Sarah's class several times, and then we have these conversations about how things went and how to improve these tasks. So that's kind of where I feel like I fit into this conversation, and what I kind of bring to the table is that pedagogical piece of sort of preparing students for the competition. And I'd also be happy to talk with you about, I think judging is a really good place to start. If you're not sure if you want to do SCUDEM yet, but you could just be a judge, right? I'm sure Brian would be very happy having me tell you that judging is a great experience, and they need judges, and it helps you see what types of problems students will do and how they will solve them. So that's a great place to start and to begin to get some student buy-in. So yeah, that's kind of what I would say I could offer in terms of Q&A, and I'll pass it along.
Thank you. So I'm Vinodh Chellamuthu. I'm from Dixie State University in St. George, Utah. I've been here for 6 years, and with the SIMIODE, I've been heavily involved for the last 4 years as a local host coordinator, and whatever I could do through SIMIODE. And I have recruited and coached about more than 45 students in the modeling competition so far. Also, SCUDEM has provided lots of opportunities for my students to think creatively outside the classroom, knowledge what they gain from classrooms. And most of the time, my students actually, they come to me and say, hey, you know what, this actually made sense now, why we learned something in the classroom. So that's one biggest message I got from SCUDEM. So that's one reason why I started recruiting more students and providing them this opportunity. And also, several of my students have said, the thing is, all I'm going to share in Q&A is how to motivate students to get to participate in these competitions. Because most of the time when I talk about this in classrooms, they just say, this is super hard. I cannot do anything. So that's what the image I got it, right? I also have a couple of students in this right now, but they are good students. So I cannot say anything about them right now. So what I'm saying is there are students who say, hey, this is super hard. I cannot. So, but after they participate in the competition, they come to my office and say, Vinodh, thank you for the opportunity. That was one of the best thing I did during the semester. So that's one thing I'm going to share, how to motivate students in this type of competitions and how to get involved in SCUDEM, even though you are in graduate school right now or faculty, whatever it is. That's what it is. Okay.
Very good. So we open it up to any questions from our participants. Again, you can go ahead and take yourself off of mute and ask some questions, or you can type it into chat and I will share the questions with our panelists. Don't be shy. We tend to be slow to start, and then at the end, we're
Pressed for
bumping
time.
up against pressed for time, right? And so, well, to get us warmed up, Blaine, I'll start with you. I'm interested in what are the kinds of things that you think are important that sometimes us mathematicians forget about working pedagogically into our courses.
Yeah, so I think, make sure I'm not muted. Yeah, so I think from like, let's go with the perspective of like developing tasks that are engaging to students and make them think about things. I think that often we get this sort of, I would call it like expert blind spot, right? Like it's something that is maybe very easy for us or like is pretty obvious. We don't really think to include that, when we're teaching sometimes. So in these tasks that I've developed, I really try to do a lot of scaffolding. And Sarah could sort of expand on this, but we sort of at the beginning of the semester do a lot of scaffolding and make sure there are a lot of sort of steps to get to where we want to. But then later on, we kind of remove that scaffolding so that they can focus on the abstraction. But just like throwing them into like all of the abstraction right at first can kind of be a little intimidating. And we think it's a very easy problem to solve, but it might not be so much. Yeah.
Very good. And Sarah, how do the students respond to that?
So they definitely like the scaffolding. I think that, for example, when I start doing a lot of the numerical stuff in my course, I don't really give them parameters, and that's where one of the places where they really need to make a lot of assumptions. And so I think that can be really tough for students at first, but like not knowing where to start. And so I think that they get better at it, but you have to kind of allow them to be uncomfortable with not knowing everything at first.
I really agree with Sarah because make them uncomfortable is the first thing, right? Because they are not used to it in other courses. In other courses, for example, if there is no modeling kind of activity, they just do the homework problems and live their life happy, right? So they just don't really synchronize with the real world, what's happening outside, how to apply this kind of stuff. Because the common question in mathematics is always the students ask, even I'm talking about more in non-mathematics majors, they always come and say, hey, why learn this? Where to apply all those things? So this can really help them to see those kind of things, and the frustration is part of the process. So if they could go through this frustration process, I think they can actually go to the next level. I agree with Sarah.
Very good. Vinodh, why don't you share a little bit about the process of preparing students for a SCUDEM competition?
So one of the things I teach differential equations every spring semester. So SCUDEM happens in the fall semester. So it's very difficult to keep track of those students and encouraging them in the fall semester. So what I did was whatever courses I'm teaching, it doesn't matter whether it's differential equations or not, I just open up this competition to them, at least above calculus 2. Even though the name sounds like a differential equation competition, students could do it. It's a modeling. It's just as far as they know derivative, and it is also your teamwork. It is part of a 3-member team. If there's one person who has a differential equations background, they can do it. So, and they also get some background of differential equations in the Calc 2 course. So that can help them to see it. So what I do is I just open up these conversations in all my classes. And I also ask my colleagues to open up these conversations in the classes. If they really like, some of the students come and talk to you and say, hey, I want to do it. But some students don't. But the thing is, initially I was thinking, okay, I got only 3 students who is willing to do this because they don't want to go through this frustration. So what I did was I made this as a requirement in all my courses, like as a differential equation project. And also I didn't force them. I gave an option saying, hey, you can either do this competition or you do the same kind of project towards the end of the semester project. So it's an optional thing. And I told them, okay, if you do this, you get a real experience, and also you can build up your CV, which can help you when you go for interview. And when the interviewer is going to ask you, hey, okay, talk about your group work, they can always refer to this competition. Hey, talk about your writing skills or presentation skills, they can refer to this competition. So that's how I started recruiting more students into this. So now out of 20 students in my class, if I give an option, at least 12 to 15 students pick this option. So that's what it is.
Yeah, I do a similar thing in my course. I think that having an option to kind of participate officially, and I incentivize it with some bonus point perks. But I think that can be really helpful.
Students love the bonus points. There's no doubt about that. All right, and so can we get any of the participants to ask a question here or get some conversation rolling? Any students out there? Have you participated? Things you liked, questions you have? What might be different at your institution versus somebody else's?
I just want to know the difference between SCUDEM and MCM.
Very good. Who wants to grab onto that?
Yeah. Okay. So SCUDEM. Okay. There's a difference. You can say it. Yes, you're right. So SCUDEM is more like differential equations modeling, but MCM and ICM, there's an option. You can choose differential equations or any other modeling. According to me, you can choose anything in mathematics, or for ICM thing for interdisciplinary contestant modeling. The people, sometimes students don't even use lots of mathematics. They just approach that problem in a different way. But the main difference would be SCUDEM would require you to have in differential equations modeling. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I think in my experience too, the SCUDEM problems seem a little bit more straightforward than the ICM ones typically, because they are kind of more narrower in scope. And so I think that SCUDEM might be better for younger students especially. I think that like a freshman or sophomore could probably, or maybe a sophomore would be a good person to try to engage in SCUDEM.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So what has the SCUDEM experience been like at Virginia Military Institute?
So the first year, they basically, I gave them a week of class to work on it because their time is really constrained a lot of times to do stuff outside of it with their military training. But I think if you had more traditional class, you wouldn't need to maybe give up that class time. But the students worked on it during class. And then they, at that point, went to a neighboring school to present their work. So
they were really excited to do that. And, just, they don't really get to go off of campus that much. So they were really excited, but just to get to see different ways of thinking and engage, and have conversations with other students. And I think that'll be a good segue into kind of getting student buy-in, and that if you do have students participate, then getting students to participate in the future, I would really recommend having those students that had a really good time, just like maybe pop into your class and just give a little spiel about like how great of a competition and how great of an experience that SCUDEM is. So, yeah.
Yeah, and then in the last year, 2020, I think that there was still some really strong group dynamics. So I think that they really enjoyed working together on this as a group, but they didn't have that maybe outside interactions that were really positive, I felt like. Especially when they presented, I think that the atmosphere was very collaborative and just really supportive, I would say.
Did the so it's a part of a course that you teach, Sarah?
Yes, I teach the differential equations course, and so far I've only taught it in the fall. And so as a requirement for the course, they can either do it kind of officially or do a different project if they don't want to participate officially. So basically, if they couldn't actually attend the competition, then they would do something else.
I
So
think,
similar to Vinodh, right? That's what you did in your course.
yeah.
And then, so how many, I'm curious, what percent of the students chose to go to the competition and not?
So
Either of you, or both
I
of you.
had 6 groups, 6 students, 2 groups the first year. So that was about half of my class. And then the second year, I think it was also about half, but I taught 2 sections. So I had maybe 12 or 12-ish students.
Yeah, and I don't, that might be a little skewed just because Sarah said that their time is really constrained. So having to do this extra thing outside is just tough. And also just maybe for some context, our department really does value mathematical modeling. We actually even try to do it in our QR courses and require our students to do ICM as part of their capstone. So that's just kind of something that is really weaved into a lot of what we do in the department.
Vinodh?
Yeah, so the same thing, I would say the students, like more than 50% of the students choose this. And I have given this opportunity like for the past 2 semesters. And also I would like to point out, Brian is planning on something called SCUDEM Light. That is during the spring semester. And that is targeting mainly on sectional meetings, MAA sectional meetings. And that is also a good addition because MAA right now is splitting away from the joint mathematics meeting. So more activities in the section would be more ideal. So we piloted SCUDEM Light last year, that is last 2020, and because of the COVID-19, we canceled it. But we canceled in the sense like in person, we canceled it because all the meetings got canceled. But we did it through the online, where the students, how does the SCUDEM 5 work last time, like video presentation, like submitting a 10-minute video of the presentations. We did that in SCUDEM Light, like around like 8 teams participated. That most of the teams are from Dixie State because it was too much during the COVID-19. It happened right in the March, so that's what it is. And Brian is planning on expanding that SCUDEM Light to all the sections in future. So that will be also a good opportunity for kids to start very low stake, because it is just like only one problem. And we are also planning on just like whichever is more practical at that particular spring semester. For example, COVID-19 is more practical right now. And for next year, it may be something else for the real world. So it will be only one problem. So it can expose students to some sort of modeling, and then we can go from there.
Is the intention for is the problem like supposed to be easier too, or is it just like smaller scope or like more scaffolded or something?
Yes, the idea is just to be more open, not like SCUDEM really gives instructions kind of thing. Like, so in SCUDEM Light, it could be more open. They can choose any sort of logistics or any sort of particular problem perspective. So they can do it.
Gotcha. Interesting.
So what kind of things do you guys do to prepare the students? What are some of your best practices? I'm presenting later about my first foray into it, and I will say it didn't go very well. I didn't prepare them for what they needed. So what are some of the things you could share with us that work?
I will at least have like 4 meetings, but right now, when I was starting initially, I couldn't really meet with the group because I do not know what I'm doing. So there's not many past problems or past solutions, all those things. Now, actually, I'm requiring everybody who is participating, like they have to have 4 meetings with me, like as a group, and we will share some of the past solutions from previous years. And then we will go over it, some of the techniques. So that can help them. That's what that actually helped them a little bit.
Good.
Yeah, I would say I know a lot of what sort of we do or Sarah does in her class is the idea of using the tasks on SIMIODE's website, and kind of like I said with the scaffolding, starting with things that are really structured, and then introducing problems that are a little bit more abstract, or maybe have a lot more parameters, a lot more things going on. And that kind of, I think, helps set them up a little bit, would you say?
Yeah, I agree. One thing that I didn't do that I really wish I would have, for the video version, they had to make recordings. And so I kind of assumed everyone would just make a Zoom recording and share it, right? No, that is not something that you should assume at all. I had students that took videos by setting their phones on the desk, and then the slides were just kind of in the background, and they were really hard to read, and the angles were not flattering for anyone. And so things like that, maybe be a little bit explicit about what you expect there, because it is new for everyone to be making videos and all of that.
Or even when they have to make their slides or write up their paper, just kind of talk about the professional aspect of kind of forming those things.
Yeah. I require them to do a lot of writing throughout the semester too. And so I really focus on commenting on things like graphs and things like that, because they're really bad at the beginning of the semester. They don't have titles or anything, and just kind of building up. Yes, exactly. Building up those habits early on, I think, is helpful.
Yeah, the video, again, I don't want to give up too much of my talk, but my son's group, they ended up with a 4-minute silent spot in the middle of their video, and they just could not figure out how to get rid of it. And it was 11 o'clock at night, and it was due, and I'm certainly long in bed at that point, so they couldn't ask me. So yeah, there was a lot of disappointment when it came to those kinds of things, which was funny because you heard Brian, when Brian was talking about it with us, he's like, oh, I talked to my 8th grader grandson, and he says it was easy. So then I just assumed it was easy. Well, you know, the things that some of the middle schoolers can do on their iPhones doesn't quite equate to running a presentation through PowerPoint. So we found out that the hard way as well. Can we get any of the other folks in the audience to just ask anything? Maybe they're just here as a shell.
Can I add one more thing to it? So since I see someone like, okay, there is a student of mine in the audience, Ellie West, and she is a graduate student right now in the first year at University of North Texas. And she participated in SCUDEM. So it would be nice for her to say something if she wants to, because that experience actually helped her a little bit in a research project, all those things. Ellie West, do you want to say something about it?
Hi.
It's on you.
I loved SCUDEM. It was fun. I was a bit intimidated at first to do SCUDEM, but then Dr. Chellamuthu, he made like really good teams, like of people he thought that we could get along with, and like my teammates like encouraged me, and we like met every night at one of their houses, and we would spend like 6 hours every day on it. Just like right after school, we'd go to her house and we would just spend hours on it. And like while we were there, it was a really great opportunity, I guess, to like make friends of people that you wouldn't usually make friends with. Because like we were just classmates. I didn't really know her that well until we did the SCUDEM competition. And she gave me, not only am I still friends with her, I talk to her like at least like a few times every month, but she also was the reason that I started doing my research in undergrad that led to a publication, because she was telling me about her research that she was doing with Dr. Chellamuthu, because she was a year above me. And I thought that was like really interesting research, so I wanted to do something similar. And I would say that publication is the reason I'm in grad school. So I think maybe in a cause of chain effects, being in SCUDEM is the reason I'm in grad school. Yeah, I don't know if they want me to say anything else.
I think that was a really good point about the just bringing you together with other people. Like, it's not necessarily so much about the math, although that's a really important part. There's just this human aspect of making friends and getting to know people, and math bringing you together. Solving a hard math problem, bringing people together is.
You're right, Brian. Actually, last semester there was many groups who participated SCUDEM, and one group actually came to me and said, "Hey, is it possible to do some research project in differential equations?" That was like then I couldn't. I always do individual research projects, so that group came up with a project right now. So they're doing as a research project with me, like as a group.
Awesome.
So that all worked out through SCUDEM. For example, Noel, like Ellie was saying about all these things, everything started with she was originally doing a lizard project. And due to we don't have too many resources to collect data, she couldn't do it. And we are struggling with the project. And she participated in SCUDEM and she heard something about mosquito project. And then she told, hey, I would like to do something similar to that. And then we figured out a project. And then she actually wrote everything. So it's all her work. So I cannot take any credit for that.
You were there to mentor me and make sure I was steered in the right direction.
Right, and that's another issue, I think, is that the relationship between the students and the faculty through processes like this really become a valuable tool, not only in the mentoring process, but in writing those letters of recommendation and those kinds of things, but makes, I assume, Ellie, you were able to be more comfortable to talk to your professor about hard things because some of the embarrassment was gone, right? It's like, oh, well, everything that your professor teaches, he's got perfect and he never makes any mistakes. But maybe when you look at this, he doesn't know what the answer is either. And I think that's a valuable piece for students to learn is not everything has an answer, but everything you've ever been taught always has the right answer. And if you don't get it, you lose points.
Yeah. I guess I maybe I had like a little bit of like a different situation. I kind of like was like interested in like science like in high school, so I started kind of reading papers in high school. So I was like, oh, this is kind of, we don't know all the answers. So I guess I kind of already had that mindset by the time I was in college. But I do think that that is true for a lot of students, though. Yeah. Because I was a tutor as well, and I saw that with a lot of the students that I tutored, that they are like. They just want to find the right answer, like what's the right answer, and then like I think they're very answer focused at the especially at the beginning of college. I feel like by the end they are, they're not as answer focused, they're more scientifically focused, if you will. Does that make sense?
I think that makes sense. I also want to say what Rob was saying about it's a failing in front of the students is always a little bit okay for us to do that because the students has to see those kind of things. And talking about Noel's point, one thing I realized after this modeling competitions is the students came to know, okay, there's not one solid answer for mathematics. So for that mindset, that growth mindset has been developed within the students while they get this experience, while they go through this process. So I would definitely agree with that.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
Thank you, Ellie. We appreciate your boldness coming online here. Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No, but I can come back if you need me.
Sorry, I picked on you.
No, it's fine. I'm pretty outgoing generally, so.
I know that.
Yeah.
All right, what else should we talk about? What are we dying to share? How about coursework? How does SIMIODE play into what you offer at your schools as far as curriculum? And that may be a part of the reason why we don't have as big a crowd here is because Kurt Bryan presenting this free new textbook written by SIMIODE. That's something we're all interested in too, maybe.
Yeah, well, I guess at least in my differential equations course, it did cause me to restructure that a little bit because I really felt like numerical analysis was kind of something that they needed, at least some numerical techniques. And so I put that a lot earlier in my course than I probably would have if my students weren't doing SCUDEM. So that was definitely something that changed the curriculum a little bit. And I probably did more of that than I would have otherwise.
Do you do any of the modeling projects like the M&M project and some of those kinds of things in your course?
Yeah, I do one probably every week or every other week. So the M&M one, there's some really nice ones about linear DEs that have to do with Tigger, the Winnie the Pooh character, bouncing. So that is a nice, cute thing about springs. And then Jessica Libertini wrote one about improvised explosive devices. And so how to make basically a Jeep that would kind of minimize brain damage for people that are inside if they get kind of blown up. So I think that that one, especially for our students, is really interesting and really shows why this this topic matters. So those are just a couple we do. Blaine developed one about the Avengers, Thanos. Has everyone seen the Avengers movie?
Absolutely.
So he developed one about that students think is kind of fun.
Yeah, it's really baked into a lot of our core. Just in general, we do a lot of modeling in our department, but I can see how that can be tough if, yeah, I don't know, just, you know, it's a zero-sum game. If you do every one of these tasks you do, you kind of have to sort of take something out. So it definitely can be tough.
Cool. So
What do you do, Ben?
for me, I still have this problem covering the material whenever I change some curriculum things. I'm still learning. I'm in a work in progress for that for sure. I've done activities, the M&M activity. I've done the savings, like college savings thing, all those activities from SIMIODE thing. But still, I feel like I cannot cover everything when I include most of the modeling activities. So I'm still figuring out what is the best way. Is there a way that I can create one more extra credit? Like, because it's a 3-credit class, like just a lab session kind of thing that can help to get more knowledge to the students. I'm still debating on it.
I think that would be excellent if you could sort of cover what you needed to and then have this extra sort of lab component to do all of the, I think the modeling is really important. And I mean, differential equations is so useful, right, for that. So if they don't get to see those applications in modeling, it almost feels like we're doing them a disservice, right? So it's really important, but yeah, it's tough to fit all that in
I
there.
agree with you, Blaine. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where I hadn't been doing any numerical. And then when we got to the project and there was no closed form solution for it, then I'm like, uh-oh, now what, you know? And so trying to help them squeeze that all in right before the competition. Again, another one of my many learnings. And I also do differential equations and linear algebra combined in a 4-credit course, because that's what a lot of the engineering programs around do. And so that's something we started, and that just makes it all that much harder to get anything in.
Sure.
Yeah, that would be tough. I don't know if you guys have done much with like mastery-based grading. I switched to that the last semester, and because all of my assessments were small, I felt comfortable having them outside of the class time. And so that bought me a little bit more time to do some stuff that I wanted, but it really only worked with mastery because I guess my assumption is, why would they cheat if they could retake this again and again and again? So, but maybe like a flipped classroom would work really well for this as well.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, well, if we don't have anything else, we could probably break up here.
Oh, I had one more question.
Please do.
Sorry. I was just wondering if there was a way to like involve like graduate students mentoring undergraduate students. I'm really interested in helping undergraduate students. It's something that's really important to me. So I was wondering if I brought this to maybe my chair, if there would be like some way to have graduate students mentor the undergraduate students, like maybe at my university or something like that.
I think that's a great idea. In particular, maybe something with your advisor, if they were mentoring some undergraduate students as well, you could ask them if there was a role for you there to be kind of like a co-mentor. is one place that I think would be possible to start, or if your school has any sort of REU type of opportunities. I know there's a lot of cool things you can do with that.
So I echo on Sarah, what Sarah said. So most of the R1 research institutions, PhD program institutions has already used most of that, at least some. And then they try to hire graduate students as a graduate assistant for each research group. So that is the best way to start. So I have done that when I was doing a PhD. I was one of the REU graduate assistant. I was mentoring them in the programming, helping them how to program and see what is the physical meaning of what they got as results. So that helped me to see that is a way to start mentoring. So I think that's one thing you should look into that.
If you're interested in some sort of teaching opportunities also, I know there's a lot of ones that you could do. For example, Duke Tip hires graduate students to teach classes to gifted high school students. And so you could kind of structure those courses as kind of project-based courses. And so you could basically advise like 5 or 6 high school students on kind of a modeling project through a course like that. Mm-hmm. I know what are the other ones? So I did the Duke Tip one as a graduate student, so I know a lot about that. But I think John Hopkins.
Yeah, I think
one.
There's various regional ones that similar sort of programs for gifted high school students. And you really, I mean, they are able to do projects at the level of a lot of undergraduates. So you sort of can get that same kind of experience.
Great question. I think that's great to be thinking about that as a graduate student. I think that gives you a lot to talk about when you go on the academic job market if you're pursuing like a career in academics, for sure.
All right, last chance. Anybody else? Any parting wisdom? Otherwise, I would like to
I'm wondering for this competition, whenever the students are presented with their problems, how long do they get to work on that problem during the competition?
What was that, Vinodh?
Okay. I think for the MCM and ICM competitions, it is 96 hours. Mm-hmm. And for the SCUDEM, it is like a 10 days. Is that right? It's around 10 days.
At least my experience from the before times when they did it in person, they had their 10 days or whatever it was, but then they showed up to the local site and then they basically were given like extra information and had to sort of
talk about how they would modify
not actually solve it, but talk about how they would modify that sort of in a sort of short amount of time and then present on that. I think was what our experience was.
That's right.
When it went online, I feel like they had a lot longer. Like it was maybe
2 weeks or something,
or almost 3 weeks.
Maybe because of spring breaks or I don't know, some breaks or something like that. I don't know. It was a lot. But
you're right. Yeah, this time they gave more time for the students than the previous years. Yeah.
Yeah, they get. I guess they get a lot of time, but the students will tell you that it never seems like enough time by the time that they're done. So.
Yeah, sure. I can see that.
So since I want to just add one more thing to what Ellie was asking about how to mentor students, you can actually recruit some of the students for SCUDEM competition. As just graduate students, you guys can actually, because you guys went through that undergraduate experience, so you guys can form a team, at least support them, slightly mentoring them, coaching them before the competition. That can help them to give you a taste of mentoring and how to see that. That's maybe the easiest way to start things rolling.
Yeah, that was actually my question, is how to do mentoring through SCUDEM. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I would say just be a SCUDEM coach. I mean,
yes.
As a coach, you're really just that mentor. That's exactly what you're doing, is you're a mentor for them. Yeah.
Yeah, I would find out if your school offered a SCUDEM competition, and if so, get involved with the faculty that sponsors it, and if not, ask if you could sponsor a team. There's very minimal costs to it.
Yeah, so at University of North Texas, which is where we go, I know a team competes every year in the MCM, but I don't think we have a team that competes in SCUDEM. So
You could be the one that sort of starts that,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, that would be great.
We should do that, Julie.
And also you can actually talk to the whoever is teaching differential equations and then go to their classes and then just talk about this competition and just pass on a sign-in sheet, and then who are interested. And you can also include part of a math club activity, or you can also include that as a AWM activity, whatever you guys want to do. As graduate students, you guys got more flexibility to do more things, I would say.